Hello, beautiful. And what I really want to know is what's good in your life today? I'm Kia, and this is another episode, a very special live episode of the Female Veterans Podcast. Today, I have with me someone really, really extraordinary. Okay, her name is Leah Styles, and she is the founder of the Sea Waves. And we're going to dive deep into her military service, her experiences, and what drove her, inspired her to feel so dedicated to create an organization to help people serving. And we're going to dive into all of what that's about, but I don't want to spoil it now. I want you to hear what she experienced, good and bad, and what this organization is all about and why it's so necessary. So, welcome, Leah.
Thank you so much for that beautiful welcome. I am excited to be here.
I am so excited to have you with me, and I just want to jump right into it. But before I do, I want to give a shout out to my sponsor for this episode, Eris Health. Now, Eris Health is an organization that is dedicated to mental health, and they're creating an app that will help you with your PTSD, anxiety, depression, and all sorts of other mental health issues. And this app is so different. It's so different than what's out there now. It's going to just change the space. It's in production right now, so there's nothing for you to buy. There's no sale here. It's just knowledge. And a favor, if you would go to Instagram or Facebook or wherever you go on your social media and follow Eris Health, just to follow this journey of the creation of this app and to be there and ready when it launches so that you can subscribe and get the support that you need. So thanks for Eris Health and my girl Kelly for supporting this podcast and supporting the female veteran community. Leah, oh my gosh, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you. And let's dive right into it. What made you join the military?
Well, I always had a calling to serve. I knew that that's what I wanted to do. I wasn't sure how or where. To be honest, I will say I definitely tried to get into the Air Force first. The Air Force recruiter, every time I went to visit, was just not there, I think at lunch or something. So then the Navy recruiter kept seeing me come by and knocking on the Air Force door. And I said, well, I just really want to be a photographer. And he said, well, we have photographers. And then I went over to listen. And then before I knew it, he was talking to me about how he believes that the Navy is like a family. And I grew up in foster care and in the system in upstate New York. And that was a key word for me, family. And I was just like, sign me up.
Wow. I identify with that actually. It was between the Air Force and the Navy for me as well. And I remember my recruiter mentioning it being like a family. And what really sold me was his laid back approach versus the Air Force recruiter's very polished professional approach. And also that I could choose my job. And the Air Force was assigning jobs at that time. And also the fact that he really focused on the fun that I would have in the Navy. And he was like, it is the most fun branch of the service. And I was like, sold, sign me up. So I also spent some time in the system. And so having gone to private school, which was a family environment, I wanted to continue that. And I wanted that family feeling. And I definitely found family in the Navy. So what was boot camp like for you?
Boot camp was a transition. Mm-hmm. It was a transition. I definitely struggled with authority. And that was a challenge for me. And I already had a son by the time I was in boot camp. My
Oh,
son was 3 years old.
oh,
And being away from him, it was so hard, and I missed him so much. And while I was in boot camp, Kia, I got the Dear John letter in boot camp from my first husband.
no.
I did. And, the rules were back then that you would get your mail during the week, but you were supposed to put it under your pillow and not open it until Sunday. And I got the mail, and at night, I didn't recognize the name on the address, like in the upper corner. It said, from Jessica. And I was like, well, I don't even know.
No.
I don't know Jessica. So in the middle of the night when I wasn't supposed to, I opened it, and it was a Jessica, and she said, "Dear Leah, please stop writing to my boyfriend. I find that disrespectful."
Oh my
It must be.
God.
And
I
then,
find that disrespectful.
yeah,
Your husband,
my
girl,
husband. And
no.
then he wrote on the bottom, because he was former Army. He wrote on the bottom, "Yes, Leah, I met a girl named Jessica and we're in love. P.S. If you use cotton balls for your boots, you'll get a better shine." And then
Stop
that was it.
playing.
And then he was gone. That was boot camp. That was boot camp.
Girl, that was messy.
It was messy, but oh my gosh, looking back, I am so relieved that it happened. He was my first love. We were together since I was 15, and I would have never left him. And it was a very toxic relationship. Obviously, if it ends in a
Yeah.
dear Leah letter, right?
Oh
Like
my God.
it really had to happen. It did, and I'm glad that it did, but it caused a lot of chaos. But immediately, so I had a panic attack in the middle of the night in boot camp. Like, back then I didn't know what a panic attack was, but I couldn't breathe, and they had to call everybody in. And I do recall the RDCs taking me like into the chief's office, and they were like, "Here's our phone. Like, you can call whoever you need to call and figure out what's going on with your son." Like, that was my biggest concern.
Yeah.
And yeah, he just left everything. He left our apartment, he left our BMW in a parking lot, and he left my son on my biological parents' doorstep, which was not a good situation. So I
Oh,
got to see right then and there how everybody came together, and we were trying to figure everything out and just like really create a safety plan for my son. They kind of like, they broke the rules. It was boot camp. We're not supposed to be on the phone at the
yeah.
time, right? And everybody came together, and we figured it out. So right off the bat, I started off as a single mom right then and there.
What a traumatic experience for boot camp, though. And
It
on the and on the flip side of that, how amazing were your company commanders, that's what they were called when I was in, that came together and supported you through that whole, like, they set aside protocol to
Mhm,
be human, to show
mhm,
humanity,
correct.
because they had empathy for what you were experiencing, because that's horrible. I also had a breakup in boot camp, but it was the other way around. Like, I broke up with my first love when I was in boot camp. I sent him a card, and it was like an apology card.
Okay.
And in it, I was like, because we had just got back together. We had broken up after I graduated high school. And in the 6 months before I left to boot camp, we got back together again.
Mhm,
And when I left to boot camp, he had another girlfriend while we were broken up. His parents broke us up over racial issues, by the way.
mhm,
And so um, it was not a selection for both of us. They orchestrated that
mhm,
through manipulation.
mhm,
And we finally figured all that out. We got back together, but I was leaving for boot camp. So while I was at boot camp, I kept using my calls to call him.
mhm.
And he was always with that girl, or at least that's what they would tell me. So I was like, that's it. I can't do this. I'm a million miles away. And on my way to, so I left from Pennsylvania but I enlisted in Harrisburg because that's where my school is in Hershey. It's close by there. And so my recruiters had to come get me in Philly. So they drove me to Harrisburg because I guess there was a rule I had to leave from there. And I took a train from there to Chicago because I was going to boot camp at Great Lakes, right? Mm-hmm. And so they didn't fly me. So anyway, and I had to literally figure out how to get to boot camp on my own. Like it was like my first time away from home by myself. Yeah. I did it. Right. And so I got there and I kept trying to call him and they kept telling me he was with this other girl. And I finally said, you know what? On the way that my recruiters were like, forget all your old friends. Cause I had a great friend group. And they were like, you are going to lose all your friends from home when you leave to the Navy because your life is going to be completely different. And I was just like, never. Yeah. But when I was thinking this over, I was like, you know what? They said my life is going to be completely different. This is too hard and it's bringing me down and I need to be focused because I'm in boot camp. So I cut it.
And it is, I can see it being a good time for like fresh starts and new beginnings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It was difficult. It was heartbreaking though, because I didn't want, like, it was my first love. The guy I lost my virginity to, you know, like it was like so, and it was not toxic. It was an actually really beautiful relationship that was just ended over some racist bullshit. But like, but it was meant to be that way. And eventually later he joined the Navy, actually, like years later. And I did not reach out to him because I was on a different trajectory while I was in the military, but that's another story for another day. So did you keep in touch with any of your boot camp sisters when you graduated from boot camp?
Yes, one, and we are still very close to this day. I was Division 222. She was Division 221, and we both ended up at A school together. So we both ended up at Fort Meade, Maryland for photography A school. And on the first day of school, we were sitting there together, like the first day of class up. So, you know, you get there, you do all of the, like the check-in and, you know, there was some delay. But the first day of class, first thing in the morning, 9/11 happened.
Oh my God. What was that like for you?
Thank God for her, right? Her name is Danny. My kids call her Nanny Danny. She was, you know, nanny to them. But I definitely think that played a role in, you know, why we were so tight, right? To go from boot camp straight into A school and then bam, 9/11. And, you know, my son was in New York.
Oh my God.
And it was just craziness. It was just craziness and just so unexpected. And we ended up at our first duty station together too. She got out of the Navy after the first duty station, but we've stayed super tight ever since then still.
I love that. I kept relationships for a long time. A lot of my guy friends and I are still friends. And then I have one girlfriend that I'm super close with. She's my Danny, like she's TT for my kids. And she lives 10 minutes from me even now. We live together off and on throughout our entire, from our 20s to our 40s. We live together off and on in Chicago and, you know, in Florida. And so when we got 40, we were like, okay, you know, I think it's time for us to like not live together anymore. I mean, literally, she lived with me. She helped me through my first pregnancy. I got so sick. I'm a disabled vet. So that's when my illnesses really came to the forefront. Like I was like barely managing, but I was coping with them. And that's when I realized, oh my God, I can't work like a normal, healthy person anymore. Like this is bad. And I actually need help with my child. She moved in with me and my kid's dad and was like his third parent. To this day, he says he has 2 Black moms. Anyway, and that are straight. That's what he says. 2 Black moms that are straight. So
families can be made of anything. Right?
I agree.
Family is what you make it. And so There you go.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I totally love that story. I love how close you guys are still. And I wish that I had remained close to any of my boot camp sisters. I loved them. So I always say, if you were in company 908, please hit me up. Like, it was a different time. We didn't have cell phones and stuff
Wait,
like
what year?
that. We barely had email. So like, so it was more difficult to keep in contact at the time, but now there's a lot of ways, so hit me
What year
up.
were you? 908.
I was in 1994. I went in November of
Okay.
94.
Oh,
So I'm at the end of Desert Storm, actually. Yeah.
got it. Because I know they cycle through like every year.
Mhm. Yeah, 1994. So, November. So, actually, November 19th, 20th, around then, that's when they put our company together. So if you
Mhm.
were in that company, hit me up. Um, so tell me, like, so A school, you were with your girl, and you not and 9/11 happened, which is crazy.
Yes,
I can't imagine what kind of crazy lockdown took place at that time.
it did.
But, what was your active duty experience like?
Um, from after A school?
Yeah, from after high school.
So that's where it really gets interesting is that I had an eating disorder before I joined the Navy.
Mhm.
I was hospitalized when I was 12 years old for my eating disorder on and off through my teens. But I really believed when I had my son at the age of 18 that I got married and had my son at 18 um that I was in like recovery, which I'm not a big fan of that word, but I thought I was in recovery. Um but my first weigh-ins in PRT in the Navy, like having to step on a scale in front of my peers, it was all that it took. Immediately, that 80 voice just kind of shifted right back. It came back with a vengeance, and it was just there. It was just there. So that opened up more challenges to me because I was so determined. I was so focused on being the best service member that I could be. I wanted to excel. I wanted to promote. In A school, I was the honor graduate, the number one in the class, right? Nanny Danny and I would go back and forth, one and two, one and two, one and two. And it just so happened to cut off when I was one. But we would challenge each other, like in all the good ways, right? Um, but I just knew that I couldn't accept anything but the best from myself. And that really played into my eating disorder as well.
So, for those that don't know, what is an ED voice?
An eating voice is um, eating disorders come with intense rules, and so many of them don't make any kind of sense at all. And to me, the ED voice is like what's commanding those rules, right? So think of like the commanding officer of an eating disorder, of like
Wow.
that little army in your head. It's the commanding officer. Like, some people picture, the good angel and the bad angel on the shoulders, how you see like in a lot of the cartoons.
Mhm.
For me, I've always had my Leah voice and my ED voice. And but it took many years and years and years of therapy to be able to differentiate the difference between the two.
So, I think this topic is so important because, as you mentioned, your eating disorder, like, emerged really strongly in boot camp. And so I definitely identify with that because from the time I was 9, I have had eating disorders, lots of them. Whether it was like um, binge eating, I was diagnosed at 16 as a compulsive overeater, whatever that meant means at the time. And I would spent my whole life from the time I was 9 years old dieting.
Hmm.
Like, my mom was, like, about that life. In fact, when I was 12, she started taking me to the gym, which is a good thing, actually, because I have developed a lifelong love of working out.
Hmm.
But on the flip side of that, I had that voice in my head that was always, um, so harsh and so hateful, and driving me to do things to my body that were unhealthy for me. And it was coming from a place of self-loathing. So, so when I went to boot camp, when you said, getting on the scale in front of everybody, like I felt my stomach did like a little flip when you said that, because I was like, yeah, yeah, I felt that. But I was so disassociated in boot camp that it didn't affect me the same way. Like I went through all of that stuff, but I wasn't present. I was like on autopilot through boot camp most of the time. Like I just wanted to be invisible, and I just was like, I'm going to get through this. So I was like really dissociated the entire time.
It's like, it's survival mentality. It
Mhm,
really is. It's a level of sleep exhaustion, right? You
mhm.
don't get a
Yeah.
lot of sleep, and then a lot of screaming and yelling, especially back then, right?
Mhm,
And then it's just survival mentality. It's like, let me get to the end. And I think
mhm,
it's so easy, like, to get stuck into that. So I think for me as well, being away from my son, and then the trauma of 9/11 happening. So
mhm.
eating disorders have that component of coping mechanisms, right?
Yeah.
And in the military, it's zero tolerance for drugs, so that's not an option, right?
Right.
And alcohol, you're taught so much about how to not begin relying on alcohol. You're provided a lot of education about that, actually, which, great, good on the Navy for that, right? Like, or the
Mhm,
military. And then but the thing about coping mechanisms when it comes to food is that it's not illegal, and it's not really talked about and warned against and educated about. So it's definitely easy to fall into that cycle where you have the part that is weight related, numbers related, and I think that's where a lot of people really focus on eating disorders, is weights and numbers, and that's just
mhm,
such a small piece of it. That's just where it's like manifested. That's just like the tangible part that people look at. But the other part is it's an actual mental health issue. It's a mental illness. It's a coping mechanism. And so when you're going through things like you said, like just survival mentality, so maybe it didn't hit you there, maybe it did and you don't even recall. But
maybe.
I remember sitting at meals and crying at the meals because you weren't allowed to talk. And
Mhm.
um and I remember crying in boot camp at the meals. I do. Um, it's one of the few times I remember crying, like, in boot camp period, but mealtime, it was definitely mealtime.
Did anyone like take note of that? Like ask you why you would be crying at chow time?
One time, the one RDC came up to me and he said something, um, and I said, I just miss my son. And he was like, yeah, my wife's like that with our kids. Like, she hates being away from them. And, it was his way of, like, being kind or whatever. So,
Mhm.
it was comforting. It was, but yeah, that was it. It was pretty, just like a really quick conversation.
And the interesting thing about it, which is very key to a key component to eating disorders, is the lie. You totally lied.
Yes, so much. And for me, that's the worst part of my eating
Mhm,
disorder, right? Like, I feel like one of my best qualities that I really love about Leah is my transparency and honesty and my realness. And so um, that lying and secrecy, that part that comes with the eating disorder, that was the part that I fought so hard to get better for, was because that didn't align with my values. My eating
mhm.
disorder does not align with my values, and that's why it can't be here today.
Yeah. I mean, I think so many women struggle with eating disorders, whether they know it or not, while they're serving, because we have the PRT, we have all of those weigh ins twice a year. At least we did when I was in, it was twice a year. And it's just, I remember a lot of those times, like, it was like a very strong focus, and a lot of times also when you're in the military, everything is beyond your control. You're property of the United States government. Your whole role is to take commands, to follow orders, to do as you're told, and you have no control. And a big component of eating disorders is controlling what you can control. And a lot of times, and at least for me, it was I can control what I eat. Like I can control that aspect, because I remember after A school, like in A school, I put on a lot of weight. And then, now I will tell you this too, in order to get into the military, I had to lose 14 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
So in my high school years, I was really overweight. When I knew that I was going to the military my junior year in high school, I lost a bunch of weight because I was like, yeah, I got to lose weight to go into the military. And plus, I wanted to do it for me. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I did. So my senior year, I lost a bunch of weight, like 30 pounds. And then when I went to go to processing, they were like, you have to lose we're going to waive your weight right now.
Mm-hmm.
But in order to go to boot camp, we're going to weigh you again. And you have to lose 14 pounds. If you don't lose that 14 pounds, you can't get in.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, no, apparently they don't do that kind of stuff. Apparently they'll just let you in now. but
there's different programs and
mm-hmm.
different branches try different things. And yeah, but it is definitely still, a weight requirement that you have to meet.
Yeah. So I did it though. I lost those pounds. So weight was always part of my journey going into the military. Mm-hmm. And then when I left A school, I put on a bunch of weight and it was like an issue. So then my weight was actually made an issue, which has always been a trigger for me to get set off. Cause I've been like you said, I don't know if you ever, I don't know if you ever are completely recovered from this. I think it's like a disease like alcoholism or, being a drug addict. Like once you get clean and sober, it's a daily challenge to stay healthy and to make those choices and to quiet that ED voice. Right.
100%. Well, the challenge is, and I talk about this, that, out with alcoholism, you can really be proactive and avoid situations where there's alcohol but with an eating disorder, you have to acknowledge food each and every day. At least once a day, like every day, it's a part of something you have to face. It's not something you can just maneuver around, and so it is so much the same. And you have that challenge that you have to face.
Yeah, I agree. So tell me, like, how, since we have the PRT twice a year and we have to do these weigh-ins, if boot camp was a set off for you, what was it like on active duty?
It was just obsessive, right? And there's different times. My gosh, if I could pull up like my weight, through my 20 years, oh my goodness, it was up, down, all around, like huge variations, right? And so I speak to this as somebody that has lived in multiple size bodies, small body, medium body, large body. So and the thought process is very much still the same, right? So even during times when I wasn't at risk of failing the weigh-in, I was still just as obsessive about getting that number to be the lowest I could possibly control it to be. And so when it would come down to weigh-ins, like, back then they would give a 10-week notice. And that would be just like 10 weeks of the most intense hell that I would put myself through, whether I was going to pass or not. There was always that fear that, like, oh, I'll be bloated that day and, retaining water, or I don't know. There was those fears. And like, I was always, really, physically fit during my service. So there was no realistic fear that I was going to fail the PRT, but there was unrealistic fear. Like, what if I wake up with a sinus infection and I can't run a mile and a half, or, Like, what if the first quarter mile I twist my ankle and I can't complete it? So there's still like those anxieties, like there's the realistic ones and then the unrealistic ones. And I think that I kind of, suffered from both.
I definitely remember losing a bunch of weight. Like, so my first boyfriend left when I became staff. So I was a hospital corpsman and I went to core school, and then I had a boyfriend that I met there. And then after I became staff, he left a few months later. And when he left, and it was around that time, that first PRT as staff on the base, because I was stationed at Great Lakes then as well. And that my weight was made an issue, right? And so after that period, I like kind of went crazy working out, dieting. I remember I would eat like a bowl of cereal and 3 Twizzlers. Like it was like, it would be a certain measure of cereal and milk
Yeah.
and 3 Twizzlers. And that, like, I would create like these crazy, okay. And then I went through my like lean cuisines period where I would eat. And I was like, sometimes at points in my life, I would eat like 600 calories a day. I would be like very regimented. I was so incredibly anorexic, but I will tell you, this was after the Navy actually, but I was the most I ever weighed in my life. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't understand that I was not eating any food. I was working out 2 hours a day, and I was not dropping any weight at all. And I was like, you wouldn't believe that I'm just like I'm taking laxatives, I'm not eating, and I'm waste.
I'm so glad that you brought that up. I am
Yeah.
so glad that you brought that up because that is a major myth. So many people hear the word anorexia and they think small, frail, skinny bones. And, honestly, the statistics, the data will tell you. Do you know what percentage of people with an eating disorder fall within the underweight category?
I have no idea.
Take a guess. What percentage?
I don't know, 50, 60%?
6%, Keely.
Shut up.
The other 94% of people with an eating disorder are not underweight.
Oh my goodness. I never knew that. I thought, and you know what the eating disorder voice would be like, what is wrong with you? You can't even starve, right? Like you can't, you know what I mean? But that was after the military, but it was part of a process of up and down. Like you said, I've been multiple different sizes in my life, right? And so up and down, up and down. And while I was in the military, that next PRT, I had lost so much weight, and I did it. And there were times where I was really healthy. Like I would do it in healthy ways, but there were times when that eating disorder voice and that self-loathing would come to the top. And then you couple that with dysmorphia, right? So I always tell people I have no idea what I look like. I don't know what I look like. I look in the mirror every day. Obviously, I put makeup on. I have no idea what my body looks like, what my face looks like to anyone else, because because of the dysmorphia, I see something completely different. And that's also something that accompanies eating disorders often, and that people don't really understand. And that was definitely going on for me in the military as well, where that initial pressure to lose weight was like then a cycle. And then I lost all this weight, sometimes in a healthy way, but sometimes in a really toxic and unhealthy way. And that was my cycle in the military, to the point where I transferred into the pharmacy. I started to be a pharmacy tech, like same role as a pharmacist, really, in the military, which I loved. I loved that job so, so, so much. And my commander, God bless him, Commander Hirsch, shout out to him, was the most amazing commander. He was an incredible human being and a wonderful leader and just an awesome, awesome role model. And he was very fit. He was a runner. And I had never been a runner before. I actually hated running. But because we got an extra hour and a half if we worked out at lunch, because he was big into fitness, and he was like go. And so I started running. Now, when I started running, I went into it. Like I got Runner's World, I got the fancy shoes, like I went into it and I would be running 4 miles every few weeks. And then at some point I had a breakup and I stopped eating. And the breakup triggered the eating disorder to come back.
Mhm.
And then I would be running or working out and not eating really. And I got so skinny. I think I was doing Slim Fast shakes at the time. And at that time in my youth, it was like if I thought about losing 20 pounds, it'd be gone in like 2 weeks. Like,
Mhm.
right? And so I actually got counseled by my HM1 for having an eating disorder. She pulled me aside and she said, "I think you have an eating disorder." And I lied.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
because
I said, and I was angry too, by the way. I was pissed.
yes. Yes. So that's so interesting that you brought that up. I spoke on Saturday at the Orlando National Alliance Not One More rally for eating disorders. And we talked about um lighthouses in our lives, right? And the lighthouses, how they shine a light on us, and how sometimes we picture them to be something that they're not, right? And so I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, like, your HM1 was a lighthouse for you at the time,
Mhm.
right? It wasn't what you wanted. It didn't look like how you wanted it, made you angry and whatnot. And I'll tell you, my lighthouse, who I spoke about on Saturday, was a Corpsman CMC. He was my CMC on deployment, and he held an intervention for me on deployment. And
Wow.
I was furious.
I
I
bet.
was a senior chief at the time, and I was the amount of anger that I unleashed. Um, you know, he wanted me to lead deployment with my sailors that we had gone through workups together. Like we had done this, thing, and then to leave them halfway through was just not an option for me, right? And he could see how sick I was. He knew
Mhm.
how sick I was, and he knew from the beginning because he had to sign off on my orders for me to even come to the carrier because I had an eating disorder in my record. Um, but he was that lighthouse for me, and I didn't make it easy for him whatsoever. In fact, I asked to speak to the CO and the XO, and they both said same thing, like senior, like we get it and we hear you, and somebody has to care for you more than you're caring for you right now.
Oh,
Yeah. But I look back on my career at all the different times that I thought that I wanted somebody to intervene or save me or help me or recognize my struggle. Um, and I would test different leadership with different things. I'd bring up eating disorders or disordered behaviors and see what their reactions were to see if they could handle. I would bring up mental health issues and just see, like, test them out. So I kind of had in my head what my lighthouse would look like. And but by the time, I mean, that deployment, I'm a senior chief. It's I think I was at my 17-year mark. Like I wasn't trying to do eating disorder, healing and recovery. I just wanted to serve, and then I wanted to retire. Like I wanted to serve. I did want to serve longer than 20 years. I did. Um, but that's what I wanted to focus on. I didn't want to focus on my eating disorder at that time.
oh, wow. So that's deep. And I love the lighthouse, and I noticed the lighthouse in your logo. And I think I've had a few in my life. And I also had some of my friends like TT. Sorry, T, I'm going to out you right now. But we went through a lot of these struggles together. And I had another friend, Susanna, who was my eating disorder buddy as
Yep.
well. And so we thought of it like workout partners, right? But really, the truth is, we were very hard on ourselves and our bodies. And I wonder for you, like, um, I met those girls really early in my career. So what was it like for you, like going backwards, because then you were a senior chief, but going backwards in your career years earlier, how did you go through this process of like managing these eating disorders, and how did it end up in your record?
So it's interesting that you bring up that you had eating disorder buddies, because
Mhm,
I think this is very common in the military.
mhm,
I think, like, if you look at the way we are with camaraderie, right? Like,
mhm.
none of us wants each other to fail a PRT or a weigh-in, so we're going to help each other at all costs necessary.
Any means necessary, that's what we used to say.
Right. And so
Mhm,
you could go to any base or any command in the weeks leading up to a weigh-in and find these buddies who, I mean, we would challenge each other to 300 calories a day, and but in a camaraderie way, like, we can do
mhm,
it, you can do it. We would challenge each other to apple only diets or watermelon only diets or whatever the soup diet was, or the whatever it was. We would challenge each other. This is also so disordered, right? And we could see it.
mhm,
But like, my eating disorder brain would find these disordered things and just latch on. And there would be groups of people who would, take laxatives and then go sit in the
mhm,
sauna and sweat it out, and like all these disordered things. And we would do it as a group, as camaraderie. Like, you really see it a lot going through chiefs initiation, right? Like, you don't go that long with, for me it was 42 of my closest brothers and sisters. Like, if you don't make weight, a half a pound or a half an inch means you're not walking across that stage to get your anchors, and I'm not leaving anybody behind. So that
mhm,
means I'm challenging you to intentional dehydration. Like, that becomes a priority. Like, who
mhm,
cares if we're on an aircraft carrier in 110-degree heat and, catching jets? I'm convinced that the right thing to do is to help you not fail by half an inch, right? So that's
mhm,
that buddy system that we have, and we get it wrong when it's disordered. Um, but how did it get in my record?
mhm.
Uh, I had worked for the same commanding officer at this point for 3 years in a row. This was at my 15-year mark. I had been Sailor of the Year consecutively those 3 years in a row. So his number one, right? Consistently. In fact, during the time that I worked for this captain, he got sent IA to Iraq, where my husband was also IA to Iraq. And my husband got assigned to be his duty driver. So anytime he would leave the wire and come back, um, it was my husband that got him there safely. So I had like a super professional but close relationship with my commanding officer at that time. Well, lo and behold, I ruptured my esophagus from purging too much. And I knew that he knew. And I got word, as soon as you get back from the hospital, you got to go see the captain. And, you know, any other time that I would go in his office, we would sit at the couch, and talk about how we were going to lead the command at that time. So I went to his office and I knocked and went to go, walk in as normal. And he stopped me and he said, "Stand at attention." And he said, "There's no place in my Navy for you."
Wow, how did you feel in that moment?
I shattered. I broke. I ended up having to go to legal and fight it and fight to stay in. Luckily, I did have good evaluations and a great career to kind of back me up on that. But that was surface level, right? Internally, I thought, here's a man that I respect, that because all along in my career, I'm like, well, what if this leader found out? What if this one, but I always thought, if this captain finds out, like, he's going to know that I'm more than my eating disorder. Cause I've proven to him, like, my work ethic, like, I've proven myself. So I can have this broken piece of me because he knows the rest. Right. And when all of that got pulled away because of an eating disorder, and I told him, I'm the same person I was yesterday before you knew. Like, I'm the same person. Um, so that happened at my 15-year mark, and I fought to stay in, and I got to stay. But what happened was then I had to become even more secretive, right? Then
Mhm.
I had to lie even more and hide it even more because I couldn't risk it. So then I went to I was sea duty then. I went to a shore command, and I was, getting myself together when my husband was on sea duty, and I knew. Do you ever just lock in on orders and know what it is that you want? Like, I knew I wanted to go to CBM 77. Like, that was my ship. I've always wanted to do it. And then I got orders. So I got orders to the ship, and then it came down flagged from my eating disorder. I was like, I'm not taking no for an answer. It was in my record from when my esophagus ruptured. So I went and requested a meeting with the triad, and I sat down and with the CMC of the ship, and I showed them all my evals and everything. I'm like, you need me in your media department. Like, you need me on this ship. And I showed to him all the reasons why. And he was like, you're right. You're right. We do. And I do. And he was like, and I will. I'll take you on my ship. There's no purging on my ship, Leah. You will not purge on my ship. And I was like, okay, I won't. Fair deal. Like, I won't. And I meant that. Oh God. Oh, I meant that. I really did. I promised it, and I meant it when I said it. But, we weren't going out to sea very much. For me, it was easy to not purge on the ship because I wouldn't eat on the ship, right? Like,
Yeah, I was gonna say you find something else. Oh, okay, I won't purge. I'll take laxatives.
yeah,
Oh, okay.
or I will
I
eat
just won't eat.
yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. And we find compensatory behavior. But then, the more we would go workups, 2 weeks out, a week back, 3 weeks out, a week back. And, and he would just stay on me. Not only was he a former corpsman, he had a family member, a loved one with an eating disorder. So he knew
Mhm.
all the signs and symptoms.
Yeah.
And this guy, he's never been one to mince his words or to leave out something that he meant to say. And he said to me, he said, Leah, you will not hide behind your big smile and your strong work ethic.
Oh, child. Red to filth.
Those are my two things. If I can't get you with my work ethic, I'm gonna get you with a good joke.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, not here. No way. So, I did. I ended up just falling in. I mean, by the second week of deployment, I was purging probably 5-10 times a day.
Oh my
And
God.
he would come down to my office and be like, where's senior? And I'm like, like, people knew at a certain point, like, even in the Chiefs mess, like, I remember, like, sitting around in the table. So I was sent TAD. I was TAD from the media department to mess caterer. So, like, kind of running the Chiefs mess, right? So I was kind of both because I couldn't keep myself out of the media department either because I love those sailors too. So I was kind of really wearing, both of those hats. But um, at some point, like, I just didn't even care. I remember, like, there being a group of chiefs, and I'd eat, and I'd be like, hang on, I'm gonna go throw that up real quick. I'll be right back. And I'd come back, and, like, I just, I just hit them with the shock, and they try to, like, ask me something, and I'm like, that's it. We're not talking about that. We didn't. But I remember one morning. It was a Sunday morning. It was the Chief's birthday. It was the Chief's birthday, April 1st, and we had this big celebration in the mess. And it was up to me to make it like a great celebration. We brought in, like, some sailors that did, like, they had a band, and we had, like, this big waffle celebration. And waffles are on one of those rules. My ED voice doesn't allow waffles, right? Like, whatsoever. But and I'll go ahead and say his name here, Human. Human knew that I couldn't eat waffles. I didn't know how Human knew I couldn't eat waffles, but he knew, right? And so he came in, and he had already been questioning me for, weekly. What's going on? What are you eating? How often are you purging? I was having to go to medical, get my blood drawn. Like, he was staying on me, and I just kept trying to convince him more and more that I'm fine, that I'm fine, that I'm fine, that he's wrong, he's delirious, he has other things to worry about, like, all these other things. But so he came down for the CPO birthday celebration, and I saw him really watching what I was eating. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna make this official right here and now. I went up and I made myself a big old waffle plate. And girl, I went over the top, okay? We're putting whipped cream and all the syrup and all this stuff. And I go sit down and I'm just like, I'm gonna do it, right? So I cut it in, I eat the waffle. I'm eating a couple pieces of the waffle. Next thing I know, he's standing over me and he's just looking at me, and I'm like, pruning it, like, see, like I'm eating.
Yep, I'm eating these waffles.
Okay,
Whipped cream.
right? And he goes, in my office now. And now I'm like starting to think, I'm like, this can't have to do with the waffle. I'm eating the waffle. Like, why would it stay in my office now? Right? So, like, and because I was the mess caterer in a big celebration, there was always things I was forgetting or didn't like. Plus, I had brain fog, right? Purging that much and not eating, and like, so I was trying to think to myself, like, well, what did I? Maybe I forgot to turn something in, or I'm trying to think. So he goes, in my office now, and he starts walking out, and you have to go up the ladder well and then down the P-way to get to his office. So I'm like, okay, so I get up. Well, I already eaten half that plate, right? Trying to just put on a good show. And then it occurs to me in my eating disorder brain, I don't know how long I'm going to be in his office for. So if I go down to his office, like without purging first, that waffle is going to set in. All that sugar is going to get in my system. Those calories, like they're going to soak it, and like while I'm standing in his office. So I couldn't even do it. I started to follow him, and then I broke off to the only bathroom that's a single stall in the Chiefs mess. Nowhere else on the carrier is there like a single stall. And I went in there, and I always, ever since I ruptured my esophagus, I always used the soft rubber end of a toothbrush after that. So my nails wouldn't rupture my esophagus again. Like, this is Edie thinking of like how to do it right. And so I went in there and I threw up really quickly, and I tried to hurry up the ladder well and get closer behind him and like follow him down to his office. And I started to pass out, and like my head started like going in and out, and I leaned on the wall, and like these sailors came around me and they like tried to like make me like stand back up again. I was like, oh God, I made a joke like I do. I was like, oh, senior don't have her sea legs, something like that. And I turn, get myself together, and I turn the corner, and he's standing in his office, and he goes, shut the door. And I shut the door, and he said, have you lost your fucking mind? I don't know if I write that one out, but he said, empty your pockets. And I'm again, like, I just can't think. And I did. And I put my toothbrush out, and it was wet. And he was like, you're done. He was like, I am so like, you're done. Like, you could not walk. You couldn't walk from the Chiefs mess to my office without stopping to purge. He was like, you're done. And that was it. That was my last day on the ship.
Oh my God. Like, what you must, like the sickness, like what you must have been feeling and going through, maybe like your entire career to get to that point to where you couldn't make it, like called out legitimately too. You couldn't make it from the mess hall to his office, and then nearly passed out on the, like, that's the sickness. It's like completely taken you over by then. For me, I never got that bad. And I'm so grateful for that. But I was bad in other ways.
Yeah.
And everybody's different.
Mm-hmm.
But fortunately for me, I was always able to not get so, like, I would get to a point where that was my threshold, and then I would be like, I have to get healthy. For example, when I was not eating, and I was eating like 600 calories a day and working out for 2 hours a day. I'd work out next to a girl who had anorexia, by the way. I knew because her bones were big on her joints, and she was gaunt and skeletal. Mm-hmm. And I'd work out with, she and I would be in the gym side by side, like, or she'd be down the treadmills down there, but I'd always see her and I'd always think, wow, she's anorexic. Not thinking, because I was like, I don't know, 200, like 10 pounds or something like that for me. And I was thinking, oh my God, I have to lose this weight. 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 So I'm a big woman. And even now I'm a big woman. And I am fine with that. Like I've finally got to a place where I really love my curves. And that voice is so small and practically non-existent, but it does come back up. So like
Mhm.
I say, it's like a daily practice to
Mhm.
manage that so that I don't slip back into those ways. But I can remember working out next to this girl thinking, wow, she's really anorexic. The whole time I'm eating 600 calories a
Yeah.
day. And I'm working out just as long as she is in the gym, taking a step aerobics class, then an abs and glutes class, then working out on the treadmill for another hour. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, we
it
have
was
to
that kind of thing.
decide what we think it looks like. Like,
Mhm.
that's so important. And for everybody listening, like, there was no difference between you and the lady next to you.
None.
The eating
None.
cause or where your eating disorder is, it's not weight related.
Mm-mm.
Not
No,
like that.
no, it is a mental health issue that
Mhm.
manifests itself physically, like
Correct.
they all do in
Yeah.
different ways, right?
Yeah.
But this is the way this one does. And I can also remember throughout my military career, like feel like having different triggers. And at but for me, behind that was like this intense self-loathing that I was punishing myself for something
Mhm.
with food, whether it was overindulging in food or binge and purging.
Mhm.
I can't throw up. I can't make myself throw up. So for me, it was laxatives,
Mhm.
right? So it's just different. It's the same
Yeah.
thing. Although, like, my heart goes out to you because amount at which you were suffering through that all of those years in the military to get to that point. For me, I knew I wasn't going to retire. That was never in my agenda. It was not a career for me. It was a means to an end for me.
Mhm.
Okay. And even when I got out, I was like, thank God that's over with. I did not appreciate my military career until 3 years after I got out of the military. And then when my peers, when my girls were retiring, I was like, did I make the right choice? That went by pretty fast. Like,
Yeah.
I can't believe my people are retiring now, right? And so I was like, huh, maybe I could have done 20 years in the military. Did I? I don't know. Because by then I realized it took me 3 years to realize how much I really loved it. But the entire time I thought I didn't, right?
It was a love-hate thing for me.
Yeah.
It was, and, and even still, there's some days that I look back and I shudder, and I'm like, "Whoa!" I have nightmares that I'm back in, and I'm like, "Oh!"
Oh, God.
And then there's just days that I look back fondly, or and again, it's the people, right? It really is
It's
the people.
always the people. It's
I
always the
look
people.
back and I think about that, but you know, and you're right. We all have different modalities, and for me, it was different modalities all the time. It wasn't
Mhm.
always purging. Again, a lot of times it was restriction, and I hated running. I hated running, but I remember for years I would do like half marathons all the time, just on a Wednesday or whatever, just a half a marathon. Like that was my number. I had to get to that like 13.1 miles, right? All the time. And I remember snapping one day at the command as somebody was like, "Oh, you do so good. I'm on my weekend. I sit around and I, watch TV and I hang out in my pajamas. You get up and you run a marathon and you're so good." And I was just so like, just hunger deprived, sleep deprived, and I just like literally snapped. And I was like, "You think I'm running because I love running? I'm running because I had to punish myself for eating a piece of pizza." And then like
Dang.
everybody got up and I was like, "Oh gosh, I just said that." But like that's what it was too. It wasn't because I loved running, but I got a little obsessive, like that, everything that happens when you get like obsessed with running and you get the special socks and the special this and that, like all those things. But it was out of the self-loathing. It wasn't a workout for love, right?
Yeah, I totally feel you. I mean, I definitely had challenges because I love working out, right?
Mm.
But I would be obsessive about it. And I think I had, you know what, when I said that I was in and out of it and I was able to stop myself, actually, I'm going to correct that. I think I had a lot of lighthouses that would come. And I think that those people would come into my life and I would shift. So, for example, when I was working out next to the anorexic girl, when I was the anorexic girl, but I was bigger, right?
Mhm.
She um inspired me, right? When I was like, she was like my goal. I was like,
Mhm.
while she's sick, she does work out a lot,
Mhm.
and I'll
Yeah.
give her credit for that, right? But there was a woman who I worked out in a women's only gym at the time because I was too ashamed to work out with males. That was just me, but I do love a women's only gym. And I went to see the dietitian and I talked to her for a while and that's what exposed me. So in a way, she was a lighthouse. And I said, I'm not losing weight. And I'm working, and she said, "How much are you working out?" And I told her, and she's like, I see you in here all the time, every day, and on the weekend, like half the day. And partially, my first husband that I married while I was in the military, our relationship was rocky at
Mhm.
that point. So the gym was like an escape, partially as well.
Mhm.
And I think on some level, I was kind of punishing myself for that with my diet. And I mean, I would eat like a whole cheesecake and then I would like not eat hardly anything for like 2 weeks and work out like 2, 3, 4 hours a day.
Mhm.
And, when I sat down with her, I said, "I'm working out this much." And she said, "How many calories do you eat a day?" And I said, "I eat a lean cuisine." And she's like, "And what else?" And I was like, "I eat a lean cuisine." And she was like, "It's like 300 calories." Like, she was like, partially she's looking at me because I was bigger. And she was just like, "Okay, we need to change, like, we need to get you some education. So, this program is gonna be great for you." So I paid for the program and I got this binder full of information about diet and what I was supposed to follow. And that thing saved me. I think that actually that was my turning point and doing and following because I followed it to a T because I was determined because I was like, I'm gonna lose this weight. I'm determined, right?
Mhm.
And so I followed it to a T. And I did lose that weight. I lost like 12 pounds. Like I lost 12 pounds. But that 12 pounds was me getting to my comfortable weight. Like I have a 20-pound window where I feel the most comfortable at and in my weight. And so that helped me get to the beginning. And then I kept losing weight. But that first 12 pounds was like so important to me. And I think that was like kind of the turning point for me where I started to manage better. Now, obviously, I will backslide and I will probably backslide my entire life, but I'm much faster at catching myself
Mhm.
and not going in that direction. So I know that it is possible to heal and to heal your body and to really like I approach it like an addict really. Like
Mhm.
every day trying to make the right choice every time I'm going to put something in my mouth, right?
Yeah.
And that's how I cope on a day. I still don't know what I look like, but I have been for years reprogramming my mindset around self-love.
Yes.
And that's really helped me. So I wanted to ask you a couple of questions.
Sure.
Right? I want to ask you, you mentioned your husband, so I imagine this is your second husband.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm assuming you met him. So how did you meet your husband? Number 1. And the second part, I guess, of that question is how did he cope with this?
Yes. So, go back to we were talking about Fort
Yeah.
Meade, Maryland, 9/11.
Mhm.
I I leaned on 2 people, Nanny Danny and my husband. I met him right there in A school.
Oh
And
my gosh, how amazing is that? So you got the Dear Leah letter in boot camp, and you met your husband in A school.
in A school.
Crazy.
And we talked about, we talked about dating, we talked about being together, we talked about it. And I kept saying, no, 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 no. Like, I don't ever want to be in love again. I don't ever want to be married again. I don't ever want to do any of that again. And then 9/11 happened. And I was like, life is too short to just say no, like never again. Right.
Yeah.
Um, and and he was just literally everything I could have ever dreamed of, to the point where I just didn't even think that I deserved him, right?
Wow.
Like, he grew up in such like a healthy and normal family. His parents are both Baptist pastors, like in the church. Like they're like, I don't know, I joke that they're like the black Leave It to Beavers, like, I just like the normalest, like loving, healthy family, right? And I just didn't know what to do with it. But yeah, we ended up right. I ended up getting stationed on the East Coast in Virginia. He got stationed on the West Coast, and we just weren't sure if we should give it a shot. Like, we just couldn't figure it out. But we took the leap, and we went for it. I had a little girl shortly thereafter, and then got married. And so probably the first like 5 or so years, I don't think he knew really about my eating disorder at all. Right? Like, he had never been exposed to like mental health things. Like, my biological mother was like, she was schizophrenic. Like, I knew all about mental health issues. Like, he had never been exposed to things like that. So he just didn't even know what he was looking at, right? He didn't know. Um, it did come up several times. He did know that I was purging all the time. And, he tried to bring it up a couple times. And I was just adamant, like, you don't get to ask me about that. Like, that's who I
Wow.
am. This is what I do. And that's not a part of me you get to have an opinion on.
Wow. Wow.
And then it got to the point, as we had more kids, because we ended up having five kids.
Wow. God bless your soul,
And it
honey.
became a thing that I just would say that, like, after meals, like, I work really, really hard, and other people go have a cigarette after meals or this or that. I get my 5 minutes after meals, and you will watch the children and keep them downstairs. So I get my 5 minutes, and it was just one of those things. Like, I never wanted my daughters to ever, well, any of my kids, but specifically my daughters, to have an eating disorder. And so I didn't want them to see that. So I would make it a point to have family meals together, and I would eat what they would eat. I would eat whatever the family meal was, so they could see me eating that, right? And then I just had to get it out, because that's not what I wanted in my body. So it was just a years thing that just, went on and on. I know that he was relieved when the intervention happened on the carrier. When they flew me back to the States, I ended up having to get inpatient treatment. It was really difficult to find a place that TRICARE would pay for, and I almost died several times.
Oh my God.
And I remember him coming to visit me in the hospital, and I was laying there with an NG tube. I was just living with the tube up my nose, down in my stomach. And he took my picture, and he said, I'm gonna save this picture. I'm gonna save this picture because this is the last time you're ever gonna have a tube, because you're gonna beat this, and you're gonna remember this day, and you're gonna look back on it as the past, as the history, because this is not how it's gonna be. And and he is right. That picture that day was the last time that I ever had an NG tube. And he's just been relentlessly standing by me. We retired the same day, the very same day. We retired, and we built a house right outside of Disney where the fireworks, every night we can see the fireworks from my backyard. That was our goal, and he's living his dreams, and he's absolutely by far the biggest blessing in my life. And there's no way that I would be the woman I am today, or that our kids would just be like happy and healthy and thriving if it wasn't for him in my life.
So I could cry real tears. That is so beautiful, also so frightening. But like the fact that you were able to get help, like you hit that rock bottom, because sometimes that's what it takes to hit that rock bottom and go, okay, I had a rock bottom moment too.
Mhm.
I was driving, and I feel emotional. I was driving from Florida, because I lived in Miami, to here in Washington. And I was driving the van with the kids, and my then husband was driving the U-Haul. And I drove 3,000 miles going, if I don't change, I'm going to die. I can feel it. I can feel it in my body. If I don't change, I'm going to die. So what happened was after I got out of the military, I went into fitness hard. Like I had like this whole like little, I was in corporate, but I had this whole other side career of professional wrestling. I know that's pretty random, but I did. And this whole little side career where I went around the Midwest doing wrestling shows, right? And for that, you have to be very fit. Okay.
Mhm.
And I did like a little bit of fitness modeling and stuff. So I was very into fitness. And that was probably, it was very restricted, but it was also healthy restricted, right? So it was like chicken and vegetables and eggs and lots of protein and protein shakes and lots of working out 3 times a day, but it was healthy then, right?
Mhm.
And so when I had my first child, I couldn't bear it.
Mhm.
He was like first of all, I had postpartum. Second
Yeah.
of all, I did not want to work out. I did not want, what happened was I got triggered when I was pregnant. So I had this older male doctor who was
Mhm.
my GYN.
Mhm.
And I had one at the VA too, but they didn't do, so I was living in the city, so it was easier to go to him. And so and I had an amazing GYN at the VA too, who actually really helped me after this. But
Mhm.
um, I was not using VA healthcare at the time. And I had this OB, he was an older male, and when I actually lost weight the beginning of my pregnancy because I was always vomiting, like
Yeah.
just nonstop. I didn't know you should eat a little bit all day. I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And my mother was also mentally ill, so there was not someone I had that I could like go to and be like, oh, what do I do? Like when I'm pregnant, I was trying to figure it all out. So I had terrible, like I had all day sickness. So I lost 15 pounds and it was starting to get alarming. Um, and so the doctor around 5 months, I got my appetite. And so my pregnancy craving was birthday cake and ice cream.
Yeah.
And that's what I like. I would eat a small cake and some ice cream, right? I was binging really. But what started it was when I went to the doctor, I had gained the 15 pounds back, but I also gained like 10 more. And he
Mhm.
said, wow, you gained a lot of weight in 1 month. And he said, you ought to be careful. Like, don't you want to have your sexy body back? And I was like, what? And he said, you better be careful. And I thought, this is inappropriate, but
Mhm.
maybe I should be careful. But that like little voice in my head kicked up. So then the next month, I gained 30 pounds.
Yeah.
And when I went into the doctor, he was like, you gained 30 pounds in a month now. It's a problem.
Mhm.
Like you have some type of problem. Your body is never going to recover. You like, and he would do that. Like, so every time I would go in for like and if I went alone, he would
Mhm.
like say these things about my body.
Yeah.
And I kept thinking, I need to quit this doctor, but I'm 6 months pregnant. Like, I can't, I don't think I should start with a new doctor. I should have started with a new doctor. But I'm like, I need, but what he was doing was triggering me so bad that I was just like, and my response was to, he was like, stop eating. But my response was to eat more because he was saying that and because of the way. So it's very tricky the way the eating disorder voice works, but that triggered me. So after I had my son, I gained 80 pounds when I was pregnant. Okay. And I was sure I could lose the weight, but what happened was something interesting. I didn't want to. I wanted to eat and I didn't want to work out. And I had lost interest in any of the things that I was interested in before. I didn't want to be attractive because my whole life I thought if I lost weight and I got pretty, then I wouldn't have struggles, the same struggles anymore. And I learned that was not true. In fact, sometimes you have more. And so I was tired of it. And TT was like, girl, where are you at? You're not working out. You're not dealing. I'm out. Back up off me. I just had a baby. Like, leave me alone. I do not want to work out. I just want to take care of my baby and eat food. Like, leave me alone. So what ended up happening was I was almost 300 pounds, right? For years. And so I would go up and down. When I did finally start to lose weight, I took a Depo-Provera shot at the doctor's and basically insistence because he was like, oh, that your husband's get you pregnant. He can keep you pregnant. And I want to have another baby. I did eventually, but I didn't at the time. So I was like, okay, give me the shot. And even though I knew that it was a bad reaction for my body, and so when I did they did an intervention on me for postpartum, by the way, that's another story. And I had to go get help and I had to get on meds and all of that about 3 years later. And that around then, that's when I wanted to lose weight. And so I couldn't seem to lose the weight then though. Like, I think it had to do with the hormones and the Depo-Provera, but that was very psychological for me. So then that there was a period of, maybe 5 years where the eating disorder voice was very strong and very back. And so leading me to moving here from Miami, I went to a weight loss clinic right before there's like in Miami where you could get the pills and stuff. I think it was like Fen or something like it at the time. And I went to get it and my blood pressure was so high that they were like, we can't treat you. And I was like, oh my, I'm going to die. And I, at that point, was like, I need to change my life. So the whole way driving here, I was like, I'm going to die. If I don't change, I'm going to die. If I don't change, I'm going to die. If I don't change. And that thought, and I had just had another baby. So I'm like, I need to be alive for my kids, which brings me to my next question for you. Did this impact your kids? Did they find out? And how did you manage it?
They did find out when they were all teenagers by the time they found out the truth. That was important to me. And probably up until about 3 years ago, it was still one of those conversations that I was not open about. I wouldn't answer their questions. I wouldn't give it energy. I wouldn't indulge. It was just, I couldn't even say the words to anybody. I couldn't say I've had an eating disorder or I have an eating disorder. Like, I couldn't say those things to anybody, nonetheless my kids. Did it affect them? I'm sure. Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure someday there will be some therapy bills sent to me. I'm pretty sure that, even though we try our best, that we still as mothers fall short, but I don't believe that it's impacted their relationship with their body or with food. I'm always on the look, right? And I'm always aware. And now we do have super open, open conversations. And I do believe that my children have pretty healthy relationship with food in their body.
Wow. Do you feel like your transition out of the military impacted your eating disorder at all?
No, and that was actually disappointing for me. I really hoped that it would. I really hoped and believed, like, well, when I don't have to do weigh-ins anymore, and I don't have to look skinny in khaki uniform, anymore. Like, but no, when I first retired, and then I was empty nesting too. We were down to just one baby at the time. She's 18, but still my baby.
Mhm.
But empty nesting and so hard for me. And I went to the VA and I was like, we have a problem. And they're like, yes, we do. And they're like, you need immediate inpatient treatment again, like life-saving treatment. You need that now. And we looked all over and there was no place that would take me. We
Wow.
still never found that. That's still not there. So that leads me to tell you what I did with that. And that's I founded Sea Waves. I founded Sea Waves because of those gaps in care, because because I fell through the cracks so many times, and it came down to like life saving, and those resources still weren't available. So I, you know, first year of retirement was still just just failure to thrive, just failure to thrive. And I was talking to Human, same mentor, and he said, you're I was like, I have to do something. Like this isn't right. Like the fact that there's so many gaps in care and the stigma and we don't talk about this and all the disordered things that happen. And I was like, this just isn't right. Like somebody's got to do something, right? And he said, well, it'll never be you, and you'll never be healed the way you want to be healed or recovered the way you want to be recovered, as long as you're still hiding in secrecy. Right. And then he brought up my kids. He was like, the fact that you won't talk to your own children, you talk to them about sex and drugs, but you won't talk to them about food,
Yeah.
their body. He was like, this, like, he kept like, and so many people when I was hospitalized, because I was hospitalized for a few years on the NG tube, and I didn't want anybody to know, and they thought I was deployed again, like my family.
Wow.
So he really just called me out again. He was like, as long as you're living in secrecy, like you're not going to have the life that you want. You're not going to be healed, and you're not going to be able to do anything about it. So I was like, yeah, right. Like, sure. So I got on social media and I told all, just on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Facebook. I just said, I've had an eating disorder for over 30 years, and I've been lying and I've been hiding. And it just opened up like this whole like movement, this whole like just movement, and people just kept contacting me. And yeah, some people were contacting me like, oh, you should have told us, we would have been supportive. And like that was sweet, like that was, their messages were kind. Like I do appreciate those messages, but what was more important to me were the people that were contacting me that were saying things like, that's me. Like I've seen that and I'm struggling with that. And I've been living in silence, or my shipmate or my bestie or my sister or my nephew. And, all these people just were so brave about being honest about where they were and calling it what it was. And so many of those conversations, they really all ended up in the same place. And that was, okay, I admit it. And now what? Right? Like now what? But knowing what I knew, reflecting back on my career and what the military has in place to support eating disorders, the answer wasn't positive, right? It wasn't a good answer. I didn't have any good news to give them for the now what. And, as a mom and as a senior chief and as somebody who has lost way, way too many people to suicide, I wasn't comfortable with not having an answer. So that's when everything shifted. That's when I founded Sea Waves. And that was to answer the now what question for everybody in our military community, our active duty, our veterans, our family members. Family members, 3 times more likely to have an eating disorder than civilian counterparts. So I wanted to have a place where they could come get that support, where we could provide education, where we could provide awareness and have these tough conversations.
It's amazing. And I got to tell you, when I read your form that you sent in to do the interview with me, I said, oh my God, how necessary how necessary. And I also want to tell you that I have never publicly discussed my eating disorder. Most people in my life don't know right now.
I'm so proud of you for
Thank
breaking
you.
that
Yeah,
silence.
I'm
And
emotional.
me too. I'm feeling it for you because
Yeah.
you just released something that, maybe you didn't even realize recently that was still kind of locked
Mhm.
dark and hidden,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
And
and I gotta say that, get emotional. I gotta say that it's so needed, and I'm so grateful to you. And, a lot of times people come to the Female Veterans Podcast, and they share their story with me, and it's such an honor to have that experience, and I think that I believe in my soul that sharing your story is part of your healing journey.
yes.
And today you gave that gift to me. So I want to say thank you for being open to share your story with me, to touch my audience, and to connect with other women who will feel less alone in this, but also providing me the same space I provide to other people to share my story. And I really believe the work that you're doing is so necessary and so impactful and so just important that I could not be more honored that you came to talk with me today.
Thank you. That means so much to me. And I hope that you feel that as well. I hope that you feel the power in telling your story for others. You have listeners that have probably been just tuning in regularly, and to
Mhm.
hear you admit that part of you, right? To
Yeah.
admit that you have no idea who you've touched and will continue to touch. So I'm just so proud of you, and I love what you're doing, and I love that we've created a safe place for these conversations. And
Mhm.
I want to make it clear to anybody that's listening that this is a safe place, right? And reach out to either one of us. We both have really walked that, and that we both have understood that that was a part of our journey. And it doesn't have to always be. It
No.
doesn't, right? Not the active part, not the bad part, right? It's going to always be a part of, what developed us, and, like a part of, how we got here. But then we get to choose. We get to choose to not let it guide our journey here on out.
Oh my gosh, this is so amazing. So tell me, Leah, what advice do you have for our veteran sisters coming behind you? I mean, you said so many amazing things, but if you could leave one piece of advice, what would it be?
I think it would be exactly what we were just saying, Kia, is don't do this alone. Like humans, we are not biologically, physically, emotionally, mentally, we are not wired to do this journey alone. So find your nanny Danny, find your TT, find your person, right? Like find your person, even if it's just one person, right? Just find your person, and make sure that you have somebody with you on your journey.
Absolutely. I want to say thank you so much for being a guest today. I have loved this episode and thank you for sharing your journey. And I know that a lot of women in the military suffer in silence with this.
Mhm.
And have as veterans as well, and don't know where to go to get help. Like you said, there's gaps in care, and what you've created is so needed. I can't say that enough, so that they now know where to go when they need that support. And I will continue to support your organization however I can going forward. That is my pledge to you. So, however I can be of service, you just let me know. And where can we follow your journey?
Follow us on Instagram at Sea Waves Inc., Facebook the same at Sea Waves Inc., and then on our website, sea-waves.org.
And as you well know, that I always put all the contact information in the description of the episode, the show notes, as I call them. So you can find all of that there. Definitely learn more at seawaves.org. And definitely follow her on Instagram at Seawaves Inc. Here, let me just put that up so everyone can see that as well. So it's just so important. This isn't really important work. And so many people suffer in silence or keep that lie, like live in that lie. And it's so important to change that and to go and get help, because it really is a matter of life and death. You nearly died. You spent years in patient therapy that impacted the lives of your children, your husband, and that was life-saving for you, you know? And for me, it was realizing that I was too sick to get help, like at a clinic, and going, if I don't do something, I'm going to die, and committing myself to getting on a healthier path, which was easier for me here on the West Coast, actually, than on the East Coast. And I just changed my entire diet and started to do mindset work, which reprogrammed my mind. And I also advocate for getting a coach. I know about the healing power of cacao. I have worked with a coach in the UK. She was one of my students when I started coaching at London Real Academy. And I learned a lot from her as well that helped continue me on my journey. And so there's support and help out there. And Leah is a great resource. Sea Waves is a great resource. You know, follow on Instagram at Sea Waves Inc.
Yep.
And you can just communicate with her, reach out to her, reach out to the organization, learn and get the support you need, and share it with your active duty sisters and brothers, because there's a lot of men who suffer as well. I want to say that as well. And just, you know, use this resource to save your life.
Yes, yes. And even if you want to reach out and be part of our volunteer team, we have an amazing volunteer team. Either way, happy to connect. Please connect.
Definitely. And with that, we're going to wrap it up. So, Leah, I want to say thank you so much for being a guest on the Female Veterans Podcast. I definitely want to have you back and talk more about what you're up to and what you're doing. So I'll be in touch for that. But thank you for your time, and thank you so much for your story.
Thank you, Kia, and I look forward to the next time. I'm already excited.
Fantastic.
All right.
And so, like I said, with that, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for coming on this journey with me. I love you guys. Stay tuned for the newsletter. It is coming. I'm posting more on Instagram. So follow me on Instagram at the Female Veterans Podcast. You can follow all of my stuff. I'm on TikTok now too at the Female Veterans Podcast. Follow me, support the podcast, leave reviews, leave comments. Show some love, share this, like, subscribe. Oh, I'm on YouTube and I'm live. And so I will be coming live. So set your notifications and definitely continue to support our female veteran community. I love you guys, and I will talk to you next time.